Good morning and welcome to another edition of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. I am DM Bloodworth, and as you can see by the graphics, today's morning video, I'm making a return to MYFAROG 4.0. This is going to be part 5 of this series, and this video is going to focus on the lands and culture of Thule. So, as you may know, MYFAROG stands for Mythic Fantasy Role-Playing Game, and it is set in the lands of Thule, which is geographically modeled after northern Norwegian islands. And I will show a map during the course of this video as well. But the real draw to this game for many of the players that have played it has always been the culture of the setting, and that is, beyond just the gameplay and how the game system has really evolved and become uh, much more smooth in its application of the game mechanics. The the lore to the game has always been that the culture that is established in the setting is what most players really do enjoy. So I'm going to just go through some of the earlier editions and just show them off and talk a little bit about them, and then we're going to dig into 4.0 and the rule book there. So this is the first edition hardcover of MYFAROG. It came out, I believe, in 2015. Let's say 2012, actually. So here you have it, huge, huge volume, just jam-packed with rules. Yes, this was very crunchy in comparison to where the game is now, but jam-packed with so much cultural aspects of Thule that it really is the big draw to this game in general, and to in many cases the earlier editions of the game, because there was a lot of reliance on setting for this game system. So that's the first edition. Now, second edition, I have two here. I have This is 2.2. I'm showing it off for two things. Number one, the cover is really nice, and the second thing, which actually has nothing to do with the lands or culture of Thule, is that in this particular edition, I came across it. There is in the back a MythMasters quick reference chart, and I mean, by the gods, I wish that was in every single book, because this is such a useful thing. But I am going to have to get to work to actually producing one of my own, and hopefully I can get it down to just the 2 pages that this contains. So, but this is an early version of 2.0 series. Now, this is the 2.7 that most players are familiar with, whether it be 2.6, 2.7, but this is the setting that many players in the MYFAROG community will say that this was their favorite. And although I can see their argument for it, and I do sometimes run campaigns or adventures set during this time period, it's certainly not vastly better than what is in 4.0. 4.0 is just a kind of a different type of a setting. So kind of different from here, but you can transition from here to 4.0 as long as you kind of explain it along a timeline type of a thing, and place 4.0 a number of centuries ahead of time. But they are really two different settings in that in one sense, and I'll get into that. Now, 3.0, which is this cover here, and it's also the same cover for 3.3, but not very many 3.3s were produced before they switched to the 4.0 cover. This here created a completely different setting. From 2.7 to 3.0, you had a great cataclysm, a curse, which kind of destroyed all of ancient Thule, and many of the older settlements and such were all wiped out. And then there is an introduction of some more fantasy races, particularly opponents such as orcs and goblins and ogres and such. And the dwarves, which were dark elves in the previous editions that were completely isolated in the under the surface of the of Thule, where they could not come into direct sunlight, were now become more terrestrial dwarves in the Tolkien-esque view of them. So this also included orcs as a playable race, or at least it kind of statted them out where you could certainly create characters of that racial category, with this system. And to be honest with you, this was probably the version of the game's culture that that most players just didn't like the transition to 2.7 to this. Now we have 4.0. So here is 4.0, and I already have it tabbed, and I want you to see that all of these tabs are the cultural points, and the little data points for the land of Thule. So that is how complex that this rule book is in giving you those little tidbits that that the player base so much enjoys actually reading into. And we are going to hit every tab that is that I've labeled out here, and I'll talk a little bit briefly about each one. So change of view once more. So here we have the 4.0 rulebook, and I'll clear some space for myself here and get rid of those other editions and set them aside. So first thing we come to is the introduction of Thule. All right, so Thule is an archipelago located in the uttermost north with mostly temperate climate because of the warm sea currents from the south and mountain ranges in the distant west, forcing wind further southward, warming up the air before it reaches Thule. Most of Thule is wilderness, bogs, forests, steep mountains, deep fjords, and inlets, river lakes, and coves. Be prepared to enter a world very different from our own. And it goes into the origin of man here. So the Aetons came to Earth from the stars, and some sages claim that actually all life forms on Earth originated somewhere amongst the stars, far, far away. There is evidence, some claim, that men are indeed fallen gods who fell from the stars and landed on the barren Earth. If so, were they sent there because they made a mistake? Were they sent to learn something, to create life there, to build a colony, or as pieces in some divine game? Nobody knows why. It is all true, of course. All right, travelers from afar can lie with impunity. And he has these little quotes throughout the rule book, that sometimes they're germane to the passages of rules, and other times they're just there to you know make you think about the setting in this way. I've actually used a variant of this particular stanza uh, from the Havamal that in an adventure that I had written that's on drive through, and it actually plays into the story of that adventure very well. So I do use these things from the rule books. So these little tidbits that are planted throughout to allow for inspiration for gaming. So we move on, and there's Haminya is a major component of character creation and just the way that you're supposed to play your character. So, and this relates to the broader culture of Thule when you consider, even though it's a mechanic that is meant to inspire the players to play their characters as noble heroes, and to try to do the right thing and try to do the thing that is most noble and most honorable. And if their characters should die, because it is a dangerous world, uh, if the characters should die, but they live their life in a proper way, that Haminya will transfer to their next character, and or at least a portion of it will, and then their next character will be able to continue that lifeline as a reincarnated entity. So we move on, and there's of course bad karma, basically, which is what Haminya is. There's bad karma that you could also build up and become a negative aspect of your character. So I wanted to take a look here so that you can see the different races in the game, because again, this is going to lend itself to the culture of the setting. So you have common men, you have dark elves, you have dwarves. So now they've kind of separated um, along that line. You have gnomes, gray elves, halflings, high elves, high men, humans, lesser men, light elves, wood elves. All right, so you have all of these new races being introduced that that will play a role, if you choose to, in the setting and the culture of the land. In my particular campaigns, what I've done is because 4.0 takes the setting into a more Tolkien-esque high fantasy setting, I still make these new races rare and also kind of reclusive within the geography of the setting as well. So when the players are introduced to these various new races, with the exception so far of gray elves, because gray elves are a seafaring race, and they congregate along the coastal areas, and so gray elves are going to be a little bit more commonly interacted with than some of the other elf sub races that can be encountered. Flipping through, we are going to go to. I mean, There are certain things about the culture that are impacted by the birth of your character. That is back here. That's why I had this labeled here. When your character is born, actually has an impact on their attributes, but it's also a way to tie them to a deity or to like a way that they kind of see the world. And so that's why birth is come, somewhat important, if their birth month and relates to a particular deity, and then if their birthday actually falls on the same day as a deity, then they will gain a feature, a talent called marked, which allows them to have greater focus and greater purpose, uh, in a sense, for where their character is looking to go and what they're looking to do. Here we have a section on outlaws, and outlaws do play a particular role in Thule, in that they not only become a main adversary if you want to have the characters doing things that are functioning nobly, and this becomes a fairly easy adversary for them to hunt down and to try to eliminate or thwart or do whatever, or certainly not to become outlaws themselves. So I found that I use outlaws in the game as an early opponent for my player character groups to encounter, and then they can also play a role, outlaws, and a role in setting up the regional conflicts of the place, or just some regions might have a higher component of outlaws, particularly like pirates or something along those lines. And so they could even set up like havens or outposts or such that become part of the story that you're telling in the lands of Thule. So here we have, well, we have the class roles, and it goes each of the character types and their class roles and such. So here we have a section on travel in the lands of Thule, and so in some cases that is very regional, and and so that will become important for you when you're planning out adventures and such, as to see, well, in this particular region there's a lot of ship travel. There's also a section here on dueling in Thule. So dueling is not uncommon in Thule for men who duel to allow the opponent to rest and catch his breath if he becomes too tired to carry on the fight. This is especially common when one of the combatants is significantly older than the other. It is often better to lose a duel than to win it by hitting a man with a lowered guard. There's a scene, I mean, and there's a scene in the 13th Warrior, an Antonio Banderas movie, which I'm pretty sure Varg doesn't like, but but there is a scene where you kind of see that played out, where the older fighter is allowed to catch his breath or whatever, and he was really playing it out. He was playing up the fact that he was tired, but you actually do see that in the duel where his opponent does allow him to rest up, and then he kind of, the older warrior kills the younger, in a move that makes it clear that he was just bluffing, that he was winded and hurting in that fight. But it was a really great scene in that movie, and you can kind of see it here, that it's incorporated here. So it has some connection to reality because a lot of the lore that you're going to see in MYFAROG does have real world connections. These weren't just made up things, but there is some history behind them. Oh, I know I did this. So world lore is an important skill for your characters to have so that they can kind of you can give them that information as a myth master, which is the GM in MYFAROG. You could feed them more information. And I love to build up the world lore in my adventures. And then if the players do have this skill, and they quickly learn that this is an important skill to have, and it allows me to feed them a lot of those cultural connections that they wouldn't otherwise know themselves unless they read the book completely as well. So we come here to, let's see why we have this here, why I came here. Ah, down here, the bodies of the fallen, and I've actually used this as well. I kind of make sure that the players are aware of doing this. So the fallen are to be respected. Bodies of fallen friends and non-orcish foes are commonly buried in their family burial after a battle, or buried in the shallow and marked graves so that they can be easily collected by their kinsmen later. The carried belongings of the foe rightfully go to the individual who slew him, but the rest of his belongings go to his closest family, as does all the belongings of of a fallen friend. But at least some of his valuables are to be buried with him, such as a gold nugget placed in the mouth of the dead. If the fallen were dedicated or sacrificed to the gods, the bodies of the fallen are hung in sacred trees instead, and their bodies are left there to be collected later on by their kinsmen. So, and there's another cultural aspect where you take the skull of the fallen and the femur bone of the fallen, and you make sure that those are properly buried, and then the rest of the body can be left there. But that is also a religious tradition that is included in this version and in earlier editions of MYFAROG as well. So that was something that I wanted to focus on, was that the treating of the dead combatants, even your opponents, is meant to be dealt with in a particular way. So now we come to the actual land of Thule and the geography of Thule. And so it talks about the importance of the high festivals. It talks about the geographic nature of the lands. We're not going to go into too much detail there. It talks about the tribal society and the sizes of various tribes, and then it talks about the habitation of those tribes, whether there be houses or yards or thorps or hamlets or villages, towns, steads, and burgs. So, and talks about the description of each of those. And so you can actually start to create your own little villages or even larger towns, almost cities or burgs. The the largest areas, run about 10,000 or so. The largest settlements run about 10,000 or so. But, for the most part, Thule is spotted by smaller settlements throughout all of the various islands. The Thulean salute. I'll come down here a little bit. So to the Thulians, the handshake is only used when they make arrangements, close deals, and officially break deals. The two parts will shake hands, and a third part will push the hands down to separate them to confirm a deal. He will push the hands up to break a deal, hence the term break up with somebody. For greetings, they show their open weapon hand, the right if they are right-handed, the left if they're left-handed, to show that they come not with a weapon in hand, and they say hail or hail uk sail, hail and joy, the Thulian salute. For old friends, a hail followed by a hug is not uncommon. When warriors wearing helmets meet, they lift the helmet to show their faces before they salute normally. This is to us known as the military salute, and is of course only done when the soldier is wearing a hat or helmet. So, the strange lands of Thule, you have Jotunheim, or Jotunheimer, World of Hunger. The hideous hunger is the domain of Entons. So this is obviously magical land that is, I want to say it's like parallel to Thule. So this is, not a region that you can just travel to. Then you have Niflheimer, the fog world. All right, so the Black Elf world and the dangerous darkness is hid in the vast underground kingdom of the dwarves. So again, this can be traveled to, but it's separated, magically, or very hidden and secretive and very dangerous to travel to. And then you have the fairy realm, and the dreamland is the forbidden realm of wood elves ruled by Freya herself. And again, another place that is kind of parallel in a sense to the prime material Thule that does exist there. It could be traveled to by means of either secret passage or potentially magic, but it's meant to just be someplace out there that player characters won't have access to unless somehow they stumble upon it. Then we have the lands of Thule. So these are the lands of men and creatures of the lands of Thule, and they have each of the islands and then its major settlements that exist throughout throughout all of the archipelago. So, and each one has its kind of its own flavor to it, its own twist to it, and many of them have a cultural relation to the real world that that is included. So, like Agadir is a real world resemblance is like Indo-Aryans, Persians, and Sumerians. Um, Scampinawia, I'm terrible with the pronunciations, are like the Balts, the Finns, and the Scandinavians. So we have that here. Um, I play often in this region. I use this region for a lot of my adventures. Um, I also have quite a few adventures that take place in Propenio, and this is a resemblance to Britain's Picts, Celts, and Gauls. So there you can use these suggestions and these different these different real world influences, or you can discard them and just have just a totally different cultural resemblance as you wish. Bands, cults, and organizations throughout the lands of Thule. So you have the Rangers. So Rangers in Thule are very religious characters, and it's very difficult to qualify to be a ranger to begin with. Same thing with bards. Very difficult to qualify to be a bard or a ranger, and so they do hold an important significance in Thulean culture, almost like rangers did in Middle Earth as well. So once again, you see that kind of Tolkien-esque view um, that MYFAROG has always had. So it's not just an introduction to 4.0 or even 3.0, where the game was brought more into a high fantasy setting. Here, it's talking about, Rangers in their role have been there throughout all of the versions of or editions of MYFAROG. So here's a new one. All right, so the Rikash Thules, our king of the Thules, is a group of humans whose main objective is to unite all high men and common men of Thule and build a Thulean confederacy ruled by one high king. Many Thuleans see the formation of a Thulean confederacy as the only way to save the Thulean heritage. Their symbol is the name Thuleus, written with the dark red runes, usually on a blue flag. How to become a member, be a native, share and express their ideals, and they might seek you to join them. All right, so there are different groups throughout Thule and organizations and cults that all lend themselves to you developing your own version of Thulean culture and society, but they give you the framework here. And here, as I mentioned earlier, you do have pirates, you do have temples, you do have all of these other organizations and such that will play into fleshing out the rest of the culture of the land. Shield maidens, they have a section here on shield maidens, are not only supply the warriors with new weapons and shields, they also cook, perform mundane tasks for them. They shout encouragements to the warriors in the heat of battle, and if their warriors are losing, they sometimes rip open their dress or shirts to expose their breasts to show what is at stake. If their warriors lose the battle, the shield maidens risk being taken as booty. This makes their warriors fight harder, and quite often it can turn the tide of the battle. So, well, once again, I mean something that you usually wouldn't come across is these little tidbits of lore that you don't see elsewhere. Um, I've never read that about shield maidens whenever they've been used in other fantasy RPGs, and this one probably has more cultural relevance than those others. It's probably truer to the way that shield maidens functioned, rather than these, Valkyrie-like warrior females that you would see um, in other RPGs. So there's a system of justice, and the system of justice in Thule is harsh in many instances, as you would expect in such a harsh environment. All right, and the laws in native Thule uh, are not based on modern understanding of law, the Roman law, but on the leges barbarum, the laws of the barbarians, the laws of non-Roman Europe in antiquity. Punishment is an unknown term in Thule. The peoples of Thule are too intelligent to come up with and embrace such meaningless and primitive concepts. However, if you break the laws and rules, there will be consequences. So murderer must pay compensation, 15 ounces of gold, to the kin of the dead. The fine is doubled if the victim is a woman. In addition to that, the murderer becomes an outlaw for 1 year and 1 day. You cannot murder an outlaw. You can only kill an outlaw. See killing. A murder is a dishonest killing, an assassination, a backstabbing, a killing of an unarmed, non-outlaw man, killing for no good reason, or an originally honest killing where the killer tries to hide his guilt to avoid having to pay compensation or to put the blame on someone else. If you kill someone in an honest way, it is instead defined as a killing. The murderer who murders a second time must pay compensation to the kin of the dead and is then executed, sacrificed to Tyr. So you just have a different aspect of what murder is, and it's not based on Roman law, which most RPGs are written based on. They just are Western, belief systems of what laws are and what, murder is and such. Outlaws are beyond the protection from any laws, and so you saw that just in you can't murder an outlaw. You can kill an outlaw, and there's no negative consequences for doing so. So when a person becomes an outlaw, even for just a year and a day, they really are kind of marked, and it becomes a very difficult existence to fall on that side of the justice system. And there are other things, so they go into detail here about killing, theft, and vandalism. The perpetrator must pay the compensation equal to the real value of the object stolen or vandalized, plus a sum equal to 5 ounces of silver. The second time you are caught stealing or vandalizing, you are also outlawed for 1 year and 1 day. The third time you are executed, sacrificed to Tyr. Theft or a horse of a pony, the thief must pay 3 pack horses or ponies or 5 riding horses, ounces of gold in compensation, and is then executed. All right. It's kind of weird because it's like, well, if I'm going to be executed, then why am I going to pay? So that's a little bit strange that they would do both, but perhaps it has to do with their haminya. It would be dishonorable not to pay the compensation if you're caught, even though they are going to execute you as well. So that's something that I would probably tie into there. There's adultery, there's cowardice, there's dueling and charging interest and fines and false rumors or lies. More about outlawing, and then there's justice for non-natives in Thule is different. They rule under the principles of might is right, and if a man has the power to do something, it is deemed just for him to do so. So again, just a lot more information in there. I wanted to bring this up because it has to do with the lands of Thule, and that is the difference in the way that trolls, ettins, and other types of those fantastic creatures are looked at as very much a part of the culture and the lore of the setting. So trolls, again, are different than what you might think of in an Dungeons and Dragons RPG. Trolls include wights and ghostly type creatures. They're both corporeal, and they're also non-corporeal as well. So they're they're somewhat similar to Tolkien trolls, but they're also like in an AD&D sense, or a Dungeons and Dragons sense, I should say. Um, they also include wights, which we would normally consider to be like undead creatures, um, in those settings. You have the holder, you have ancient holder, um, and again, just part of trolls. You have the undead, which fall within those categories. So skeletons are considered of troll kind. So it's kind of a combination of your traditional thought of a troll, and certain types of undead are also considered trolls as well. Incorporeal trolls are all ghosts, ancient ghosts, sea wraiths, and such, lantern men. So just a different folklore is being used for some of these creatures than what you might be used to seeing in a fantasy setting. So we go to the mythical deities, and many of these deities are, they do have their Nordic counterparts that you'll notice. So you have, this is Heimdall. You have, let me just get the simple list. So here you have Balder, Tyr, Thor, Jord, Hoder, Heimdall, Mani, Jordi, Forseti, Freya, Freyr, Saga, Skadi, Sol, Vali, Vidar, and Odin. All right, so you have all of these various deities, that most of which are connected to Nordic mythology. We come to the Thulean calendar, which is kind of unique in that, they have one month where there's only 1 or 2 days, and that's kind of like a catch-up month to get it to match with the 365 day year. But they, again, the calendar, was really mostly important in character creation. But I use this also to determine when to put adventures, where on the calendar to put them, and I usually tie it to probably one of my favorite parts of MYFAROG is the high festivals. I like using high festivals as the adventure hook to bring the characters into not just the setting, but to also introduce a new adventure to them. And so I use I use these all the time, and it's probably one of, like I said, my favorite aspect of the game is to take some of these high festivals and work them into the adventures, either as the starting point or possibly the ending point, or just the focal point of it, and have the players actually go through these high festivals. And that way I get to introduce the lore of the land to the players as well. And it really does bring the the gameplay and the setting lore together, in a nice combination. And then finally, you have the appendix of all these Thulean names that you could use, whether it be for player names or potentially town names and such. So just a wealth of information. You have dwarven names if you're going to have dwarven characters in your world that the players can play with. Thulean geography, so you have the Thulean geographic names that already exist on the map, and it just gives you the Thulean name and the real name for each of these places, or geographic features that you would come across. And that is MYFAROG 4.0, kind of a brief run through of all of its land and cultural aspects that you can include in your, I'll switch views, include in your either your adventures or in your overall campaign. Again, this is one of the big draws to this game system, is that the land and the culture is so detailed, has so many small little tidbits to bring you into the game world, and really marry the two, the game mechanics with what the lore of the land is, and then you add the component of players actually participating in that, and it really does become a tool for teaching some of the old beliefs that were held. And in many cases, some of these beliefs, like those small passages from the Havamal, if there are people who actually today follow that, it nice little reminders of some of the philosophy of that time frame, and and of this setting, that you can incorporate into either your game, or you can follow some of these yourself, as an individual, and say, what, I believe in this. There's passages about hospitality that I think are very relevant today. There are passages about death, and and how to approach the death of something. That was that one early stanza that was presented here, that I've actually used as part of a high festival, and introduced the players to that concept there. There's a heavy reliance in this game system to the concept of reincarnation, and the concept of living a good life, and then transferring that to your future persons, both in a game mechanics way and just in a philosophy of life, that that really does permeate the culture of the setting. And so that's an important thing for you to remember if you're running campaigns in this setting, is to remember that the players need to be mindful of their actions, for that purpose, that should their character fall, they want all of those traditions to be followed through on. So they're going to want to make sure that their characters are buried properly, and the their belongings go to the proper next of kin. And hopefully they're not killed by orcs, so it aren't going to recognize that. Hopefully they are killed by other Thuleans who are going to follow through with that as well. So once again, I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it's a bit long because there is so much, and I really only scratched the surface here. I could have gone probably twice as long and hit every single detail that is in here. But as you can see, I mean, this is, even on a brief review, just what I touched upon, and so there's probably at least twice as much that I could have done, but for the sake of keeping these things a little bit more tidy, we'll leave it at that. And just go out and get your hands on this get your hands on this game. It's only $10 US from Amazon. So you really can't go wrong for the price of getting a complete system, end setting all in one, 200 plus page volume. So once again, I hope you will like this video. Please give it a thumbs up if you did. If you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. If you have any questions or comments that you want to leave, please feel free to leave them in there. Any corrections, my misinterpretations, please, feel free to pop in and say, hey, you should have mentioned this, or you looked at this a little bit differently. I might have been a little bit off with some of those fantastic realms that are not really parallel to the universe, although I'm pretty sure that they are parallel places to travel to, or at least through normal means you can't just travel to them. But other than that, great system. I hope that you take a look at it. And I look forward to seeing you on the gaming screen sometime soon. I actually have my MYFAROG game coming up in about an hour, so I'm looking forward to wrapping that up as well. Just a real quick plug, self-promotion. I do have a number of MYFAROG related products on Drive-Thru RPG, and it's linked in the description of the video. So once I upload this, you'll be able to click on there and go directly to that label. The label is Arcell Games Publishing, and I have 2 MYFAROG adventures and a free, if you wish, a free guide to some of my MythMasters, tips and twists and tweaks to the game setting. I had a couple rules. I had a pet system, and just basically a homebrew, volume 1 homebrew, which actually quite a number of you, probably close to 36 copies, have either been picked up because it is listed as free, or pay as you will. Suggested 50 cents, but not necessary if you don't wish to. And it's out there for you to take a look at. And I do have another adventure coming up very soon that I have to reformat and shift it from 2.6 when I wrote it to being able to be played with 2.6 through 4.0 if you choose to. So that should be coming up in the next couple of weeks as well. If I don't see you on the gaming screen sometime between the next day or two, I wish you all a happy Thanksgiving if you're in the US and celebrate that. And I think Canadians already had theirs. But happy Thanksgiving to them as well. And I look forward to seeing you. You all stay healthy, safe, and have a great rest of the day. Take care.